So now we've learned a little bit about opportunity cost, the different trade-offs that are associated with making a decision. Bob has to decide what is he going to actually do with his time. And we know that Bob he's self-interested. That's not a negative thing. What we're going to see, we don't mean selfish or we don't mean mean-spirited or anything like that, but he is, as an economic being, self-interested. So when he makes decisions, he's obviously going to do that to benefit himself. He needs food or he needs shelter. But what we're going to see in economics is that many times when individuals act in their own self-interest, this helps out the whole. This helps out actually everybody else. So if Bob were to build a shelter, gather food, stuff like that, and somebody else shows up on the island, there's going to be food and shelter. And that actually benefits everybody else because he is acting in his own self-interest. So we could play that out a little bit more in some other scenarios. But for right now, what does Bob actually need? So Bob on this island, what does he actually need? So he needs food. He needs shelter. What does he need in order to create these things? So, well, he might need a tool. Well, he doesn't have a tool sitting there. He can make a tool, like a rock could be a tool, something like that. But this tool, we call that capital. All right, so it's actually called physical capital. So this tool is physical capital. It's something that he uses to make something else, right? So he uses that to produce something. So that's like a production tool. That's called capital. Well, he also needs some sort of some resources. He needs lumber. He needs a fishing pole, something like that, right? So he needs resources, right? And what we call that is land, right? That land is the general kind of term for resources that are needed, like the inputs, like oil or coal or lumber or those sorts of things. We call that land. All right. The other thing that he needs is he needs his own work. Okay, and that's called labor. Okay. Finally, he needs to bring it all together. Right. So he needs to bring together these things. He needs to bring together capital, labor, land. He needs to bring together all these three things, right, in order to actually produce something. So if he's going to produce shelter, he needs to bring together the capital, the land that he has, the labor, right? And those things just sitting around don't do anything, but he brings those together with his ideas, and that's called entrepreneurship. Okay, so entrepreneurship is him bringing those things together to actually produce this. It's like the actual construction or the bringing together of land, labor, and capital. So these things, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, those are called the factors of production, which makes sense, right? So we're using these things to produce. There are these factors of production that are used to produce anything, right? And these things, like we talked about before, these things are scarce. Right? So Bob has to choose. You have to make a choice how to best utilize those things, because if you're using the finite amount of land, labor, and capital that exists to build a shelter, that means by definition you have less of that material to use for finding food or the production of food, you could say, right? So if there's one tree and you use that entire tree to build a shelter, you have zero wood left to make a fishing pole or a trap or something like that, right? So those things are scarce, and so you have to make a decision on what to do with those. All right. The last thing that we're going to talk about in this one is this idea of the types of goods that we have. And so if he's deciding to build a shelter, if he's deciding to build, let's say, a bed, or if he's deciding to build those sorts of things, we're going to call those things are going to be called consumer goods. Those things that we consume, right? What if instead he were to use some of the resources that he has? The same may seem a little bit more far-fetched, but if he uses those to build a machine, right? If he uses the land, labor, and capital that he has to actually build capital, right? So if all he were doing was producing, let's say he was bored and he wanted to build a little toy car, right? So he's just building a little car. Well, does this car help produce anything else? It does not. Like, you get more cars. That's it. But if he's using his resources to build capital, then actually in the future, he's going to be able to produce more because he built capital, which is used in the production of stuff. Right? So that's used in production. So these are capital goods. And what that leads to is more future growth. And we're going to look at a model in the next video that shows this idea of capital and growth and opportunity cost. So we're gonna kind of model this little setup in the next video.